In August of 1979, a horrifying discovery was made along a quiet stretch of Old Dundee Road in Barrington Hills, Illinois. Hidden in tall grass just feet from the roadway was the burned and mutilated torso of an unidentified man. His head had been removed, his arms and hands were missing, and nearby in a ditch, investigators located his legs. Whoever had left the remains there had gone to disturbing lengths to prevent the victim from ever being identified. The gruesome discovery shocked residents in Barrington Hills, a wealthy upscale community known for horse farms, large estates, and quiet neighborhoods hidden behind tree lines. Though violent crimes had occurred in the area before, they were rare, making the case even more disturbing. And as investigators examined the remains, they began noticing similarities to other unsolved murders that had taken place across northern Illinois during the previous year. Other victims had also been dismembered in the same manner, with some of the remains being burned beyond recognition. And in multiple cases, investigators said the cuts from the decapitation appeared to be clean and precise. As the horrifying discoveries continued from 1978 into 1979, investigators began wondering if Illinois was dealing with a serial killer responsible for what eventually became known as the torso murders. For decades, the victim found in Barrington Hills remained unidentified, and no one was ever arrested and charged with his murder. Then in 2024, advances in DNA technology finally uncovered the victim's identity, reopening disturbing questions that still remain unanswered today. Were the burned and dismembered remains found here the result of an isolated murder, or the work of a serial killer connected to the other gruesome torso murders? It's a disturbing mystery that only becomes more unsettling the deeper we dive into the case. Barrington Hills sits northwest of Chicago and has long been considered one of the most affluent and wealthiest suburbs in northern Illinois. The village is surrounded by wooded roads, private estates, and sprawling equestrian properties hidden behind long driveways and thick tree lines. During the late 1970s, the area felt even more isolated than it does today. Long stretches of road were dark and quiet at night, with very little traffic moving through certain areas after sunset. It was the kind of place where people expected privacy and peace, not the discovery of human remains on the side of the road. But on the evening of August 7, 1979, that sense of security was shattered. At 5 o'clock that evening, a boy riding his horse along Old Dundee Road noticed something unusual lying in the tall grass near the roadway. As he got closer, he first thought it was the corpse of a wild animal, but soon realized he was looking at human remains and immediately contacted authorities. When investigators arrived at the macabre scene, they were met with a gruesome and horrifying sight. Lying in the grass was the badly burned torso of a naked white male, and nearby in a ditch, police located the victim's legs. A large plastic garbage bag was also found close to the torso, which authorities believed had been used to transport the man's remains. But perhaps the most disturbing detail was what was missing. The victim's head, arms, and hands had all been removed and were nowhere to be found after an extensive search of the area. Investigators immediately believed the killer had intentionally dismembered the victim and burned the torso in an effort to destroy evidence and prevent identification using dental records. Detectives believe that whoever left the body here likely did so quickly before driving away into the cover of darkness. The location where the remains were discovered was, and still is, very isolated and surrounded by large private properties. Residents living nearby told investigators they had not seen any suspicious vehicles during the night and also reported hearing nothing unusual. Because of this, detectives believe the killer likely dumped the remains here very late at night while nearby residents were asleep. An autopsy revealed the victim was a white male estimated to be between 30 and 35 years old and approximately 5 foot 7 inches tall. But because of the condition of the remains and the limitations of forensic science in 1979, investigators had no way of determining who the man was. No missing persons reports in the area appeared to match the description at the time. Fingerprints were impossible to obtain because the victim's hands were missing. And without a skull or dental records, identifying the victim became nearly impossible using the technology available at the time. As investigators searched for answers, detectives began noticing disturbing similarities between the Barrington Hills case and other gruesome murders that had occurred in northern Illinois the previous year. These unsolved crimes, which were nicknamed the torso murders, didn't receive much media attention in 1978. likely because they unfolded during the same time period as the investigation into John Wayne Gacy and the bodies found in his crawlspace. The first horrifying discovery in the string of the unsolved torso murders occurred on April 30th, 1978, when two men at the Skokie Lagoons in Glencoe, Illinois found 4 plastic bags floating in the water. Inside the bags were dismembered human remains belonging to an unidentified white male. An examination of the body parts revealed that the man had been stabbed in the torso and his head was missing. Investigators also noted that the body parts appeared to have been cut off with precision, just like the man's torso that would be found in Barrington Hills 1 year later. The cuts were described by authorities as appearing clean and precise with no ragged edges, leaving authorities to believe the killer may have had experience doing this before and likely used a very sharp knife or a saw. Despite an extensive investigation, the male victim found in the lagoon in 1978 was never identified and no one was ever arrested. Then on June 20th, 1978, another torso was discovered in Lamont, Illinois after a 55-gallon drum was pulled from a ship canal, and inside the drum was the mutilated torso of a woman. Unlike the previous victim, authorities found no stab wounds on the remains, adding even more mystery to the case. The victim was never identified and no arrests were ever made. Only 2 months later, another gruesome discovery shocked investigators. In August of 1978, a woman's dismembered body was discovered inside a luggage trunk that had been set on fire in a forest in Calumet City, Illinois. Unlike the previous victims, the body was badly burned from the fire, but she was eventually identified. Her name was Kathleen Opachan, a 21-year-old who worked at a Jewel grocery store and also bartended at a local tavern in Calumet City. Investigators determined she had likely been strangled or hanged to death, and sadly, just days before her 22nd birthday. Then in September of 1978, just 1 month later, a male torso was discovered in a forest in Calumet City, less than a mile away from where Kathleen Opachan's remains were found. And just like the other victims, the body had been dismembered and the victim's hands, arms, head, and legs were missing. And once again, investigators noted similarities in the precision of the cuts used to remove the limbs and head. Just 1 month later, in October of 1978, hikers discovered the decomposed skeleton of another woman in another forest preserve in Calumet City. Her clothes and shoes were found beside her, but investigators were unable to determine exactly who killed her or whether her murder was connected to the other cases. Still, the timing and location of the discovery added to fears that the murders might somehow be related. Then almost 1 year later, in 1979, came the horrifying discovery in Barrington Hills, Illinois. The burned torso found along Old Dundee Road became the 6th and final known victim connected to the torso murder investigations. Detectives immediately noticed similarities between the cases because some of the victims had been decapitated and their limbs removed or burned beyond recognition. Authorities also reported that some of the cuts where the body parts had been severed looked similar and that whoever did it knew what they were doing. The terrifying possibility soon emerged that some, if not all of these cases were connected, though detectives from the Barrington Hills Police Department were unsure. Were the man's remains found on the roadside here in 1979 just an isolated incident, or was it the work of a serial killer? The disposal of the human remains in these cases occurred in different areas, including Glencoe, Lamont, Calumet City, and Barrington Hills, and some of these areas are more than 1 hour apart. If the same killer was responsible, it suggested they were familiar with remote dumping locations across northern Illinois and comfortable transporting human remains over long distances. As fears spread and investigators looked for leads, a 33-year-old man from Calumet City eventually drew the attention of authorities. His name was Gerhard Goddard. In October of 1978, Gerhard Goddard, a former slaughterhouse employee and bodyguard, was arrested for sending threatening and obscene letters to women in multiple Illinois suburbs. Authorities said Goddard had mailed disturbing letters to more than 100 women, including at least 20 women living in Calumet City where some of the mutilated torsos had been discovered. The disturbing letters reportedly contained violent threats involving strangulation, mutilation, and cutting off women's toes. Some of the earliest letters in the case contained vague threats and later became increasingly graphic over time, with threats about slitting victims' throats like a pig, as it was quoted. Investigators found the language especially disturbing considering the nature of the torso murders in the area and Goddard's previous employment at a slaughterhouse. Authorities also discovered possible connections between Goddard and Kathleen Opachan, whose burned body was found in a luggage trunk in Calumet City around the same time the letters were sent. According to newspaper accounts from 1978, detectives reportedly had evidence placing him at the tavern where Kathleen Opachan worked before she was murdered. Even more disturbing, Kathleen's address was allegedly used as the return address on one of the threatening letters mailed to another woman. However, that letter was later lost during federal court proceedings, and as a result, it was never used as evidence. Investigators questioned Goddard about the Torso murders while he was incarcerated for sending the threatening letters, but he refused to cooperate. Despite suspicions surrounding him, authorities never had enough evidence to directly connect him to the torsos that were found in 1978 and 1979. As the years passed, the Barrington Hills victim from 1979 remained unidentified. Decades went by without any major breakthroughs, and eventually it became another cold case buried in Illinois crime records. At the time, the case was given a John Doe designation while investigators continued searching for answers that never came. Then in March of 2024, advances in DNA technology finally brought investigators a major breakthrough. Using genetic genealogy and public DNA databases, investigators were able to build family trees connected to the unidentified victim. After tracing relatives and narrowing down possibilities, authorities finally identified the remains as Joseph Caliva, a 27-year-old man from Chicago. The breakthrough was the result of modern forensic genealogy, the same type of technology that has helped solve numerous cold cases across the country in recent years. Investigators used DNA from the remains to locate distant relatives through public genealogy databases. From there, family trees were built until detectives finally narrowed the search to Joseph Caliva. Not long afterward, Joseph's half-sister, Linda Gressick, received the phone call investigators had waited decades to make. The unidentified remains discovered along Old Dundee Road in Barrington Hills belonged to her missing brother. According to Linda, Joseph had disappeared after failing to show up for work for several days and not picking up his paycheck, which made it clear something was seriously wrong. At first, the family did not immediately assume something terrible had happened because Joseph was known to occasionally stay with friends for several days at a time. But after nobody heard from him, the family filed a missing persons report. Joseph had grown up in Chicago and previously served in the Marines. He also played guitar in local garage bands and worked for the Chicago Streets and Sanitation Department. Friends and family remembered him as someone who was very intelligent, loved music, and had a creative side outside of his regular job. After more than 4 decades, Joseph's family finally had answers about what happened to him, but they still had no justice. Investigators still do not know who murdered Joseph, why he was dismembered, or why his burned remains were dumped along Old Dundee Road in Barrington Hills. His head and arms have never been recovered. Some people have speculated that because Joseph worked for Chicago Streets and Sanitation, which historically had ties to organized crime in the 1970s, he may have crossed paths with dangerous individuals or witnessed something he should not have seen. Others believe Joseph may have simply become another victim of a serial killer connected to the Torso murders. The lack of identification of most of the victims only deepens the mystery. After everything investigators uncovered over the years, so many questions surrounding these mysterious murders still remain unanswered. Was Joseph Caliva specifically targeted by someone he knew, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Could his murder have been connected to organized crime in Chicago during a time when corruption and mob influence still existed in the waste management industry? Or was Joseph the victim of something even more terrifying? A serial killer responsible for multiple dismemberment murders during the late 1970s. And what about the suspect? Was he simply a deeply disturbed man who sent violent and threatening letters to women? Or was there something much darker hidden behind the accusations and suspicions surrounding him? And if these cases were connected, how many victims may never have been found at all? So far, no major developments or arrests have been announced since investigators identified the remains as Joseph Caliva in 2024. But what do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more deep dives into unsolved mysteries like this one, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the playlist on your screen now for more stories just like this one. If you want early access to my videos and other perks, you can also become a channel member using the link in my pinned comment below or by clicking the join button. Thanks for watching.